Hello kindred longevity lifestyle designers, this is Govin here, secretsoflongevity.com. A question I get very frequently on past videos that deal with the topic of veganism versus omnivorism, or anything to do with diet really, in which I'm talking about animal foods and the health benefits they bring. There's this common question that's brought up that is either posed very honestly, or it's coming from a place of not an actual question, but an attempt to make a point by asking the question. And that's something along the lines of what is actually in meat that can't be found in plant foods. And that's a very legitimate question. I think it's something that people try to touch on, but they never really get a very broad scope on when they're making a video or writing an article. And so there's this false idea out there that you can indeed get everything you need from a plant-based diet. Now there's certainly people who can go a very long time because their unique physiology requires less of those things that are very difficult to get on a plant-based diet, if not outright impossible. But there are people who have higher requirements for those nutrients, depending on their ancestry, their blood type, and a whole wide range of different factors, such as what endocrine systems are dominant in their body, and that determines how quickly you use up those nutrients. So those who have those factors need more of these things, and they're usually the people who, if they've tried veganism, it doesn't work out and they have to switch back to eating meat within a few years, if not even shorter. Sometimes they can last longer. That's why we see this big range. Of course, there's going to be people on vegan, vegetarian diets that do them in a better way and they last longer because they're not eating tons of vegan junk food and things like that. So we're going to break up the three sections of this video into the first category as being nutrients that are either completely absent from plant foods that you need from animal foods, or they don't exist in the same form in plant foods, and thus certain people, and it's quite a large part of the population, have a reduced ability to convert them to the usable form. The nutrients that you can't get but aren't essential nutrients, so they're beneficial nutrients but they're not essential. And then lastly, we'll talk about why there's even nutrients you can get from plants which are better from animal foods, in the sense that you get larger quantities of them as a total ratio of your total diet. So items that you don't get from any plant food is, number one, vitamin A. Now, the first thing that's going to go off people's minds, oh yeah, there's beta-carotene in carrots, in peppers, in all leafy greens, in spinach, in all the different algae, and all that stuff's loaded with beta-carotene, but that's not vitamin A. It's a step before vitamin A. In most animals that are herbivorous, they convert almost all of it to retinol, which is the preformed or final form of vitamin A. Animal foods contain retinol, which is that final step, and humans, depending again on your ancestry, you're going to have a varied ability to convert this, but there are people that simply do not convert anywhere near as much, and they're the type of people who get a more orangey-like complexion when they eat a ton of these foods. You know, this was a common symptom of people who've consumed carrot juice as a therapeutic thing, and that is the carotenoids building up in the skin, the beta-carotene. And that indicates that your body's not converting as much as you're taking in. And that is a design in humans to be able to store it up for when you don't have enough of it. It also acts as an antioxidant that improves the health of your skin. So carotenoids are great, but they're not the same as retinol. And particularly in more northerly populations, so the lighter your skin tone, not only the more prominent is the orange color going to be, but the less of ability you have to convert it. So again, this is going to vary depending on the person, but there are people who get retinol deficiencies very quickly on a completely vegan diet. So yes, in a way, this isn't exactly something that doesn't exist in plants. This is something that for a lot of people they don't convert enough of. And it's not even that you don't get any of it. Everyone's going to convert some amount of beta-carotene, but are you getting enough of it? Are you having a very low-grade deficiency that causes problems in the very long term from trying to adhere to a diet free of retinol? Next up, the very iconic vitamin B12. This one has been debated to no end. It's just not in plant foods. You can make all the complaints you want about how omnivores have higher rates of B12 deficiency. It's like, so? There's not as many vegans in the world. You're taking large groups of vegans to test their rates of deficiencies, and you're using vegans who haven't run out of their own stores of B12, which can last up to 7 years if you have enough of it, and then you completely take it out of the diet, you're going to slowly run out of it. And of course, you can supplement with it. There's complications in what's the most optimal supplement for B12 and what are the cofactors you need to make it most usable. But you can just simply eat foods that have high amounts of this in it and avoid the lifestyle factors that a lot of omnivores get involved in that detract from it. So smoking, stress of all kinds, alcoholism, various types of drugs will reduce your ability to absorb it, but also will use it up too. So yeah, it's an important nutrient. Barring those things aside, if you're eating whole foods and you've got enough animal foods in there for your unique body type, you're going to be fine on the B12 department. And that's something that most people in the long run run into problems with supplementing if they're on a vegan diet. And no, you won't get enough of it from algae, from fermented foods. This is something that is produced in the gut originally, but that's atrophied in humans. We actually produce intrinsic factor earlier up in the digestive system, which binds to B12 and makes it more absorbable. And that area of the body that would have originally produced it near the appendix and in that part of the digestive tract has literally shrunk quite considerably if you compare human anatomy to some of the other great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, and things like that. Much, much larger overall large intestine volume compared to humans, compared to their body size, 2 to 3 times as large. So another one in this category is iron. So people think of iron as just this one thing. This really common attitude around nutrients and micronutrients. People don't understand that there's a variety and a spectrum of most things. Like there's several different types of vitamin D. There's several different types of vitamin E. Several types of vitamin A, as we discussed. Iron, there's 2 different types. There's non-heme iron, which is the iron found in all plants that contain it. And it is simply called that because heme means blood. And so it's iron that hasn't been converted into a blood cell or an animal blood cell. Whereas heme iron is iron that is found in the blood and tissues of animals. It's already been converted. So you take a herbivorous animal, which consumes iron from plants, and converts it into heme iron to use in its own blood. And humans, depending again on your background, have a reduced ability to make that conversion. My own personal experience was drinking green juice every day, eating an entire salad with various things on it, consuming sea vegetables almost daily, consuming large amounts of algae. All those things are loaded with iron. And I ended up with an iron deficiency. So my daily intake of iron would have been like 3,000% or something, at least several times the normal RDA. And somehow I ended up with a deficiency. And this prompted me to look into it. And heme iron, when you consume it, is absolutely 100% absorbed. There's no choice for your body. If you eat a steak, if you eat something rich in iron that is an animal food, whatever amount gets broken down and is exposed to the absorption abilities of your digestive tract, any iron that comes into contact with it will be absorbed. Whereas non-heme iron, the plant-based iron, if your body is full of iron and you don't need more of it, your body's smart in that it won't absorb it and convert it. So that's actually a good thing. So if you have foods in your diet that are plant-based to get some iron, that's great. Because when you're filled up with iron, too much of it is a pro-oxidant and you don't want more of it. But it's a problem if you have an inability to absorb as much non-heme iron as some people. So you in fact do far better and will no longer be anemic when you consume iron-rich animal foods. So that was what I had to do. I started consuming all types of meat and my iron deficiency changed. Literally within a week or two. I started feeling way better and much more energized. So one of the final essential nutrients that some people have an inability to get enough of from plants, if not a large amount of people, is vitamin B6. It actually exists in 3 different forms in animal and plant foods total. So it's pyridoxine, pyridoxamine, and pyridoxal. Plant foods only contain pyridoxine, whereas animal foods contain a mix of pyridoxal and pyridoxamine. Now, all the requirements for B6 in the human body require pyridoxal or pyridoxamine, both the types that are only found in animal foods. So pyridoxine, the plant-based vitamin B6, has no role in the body, but it can be converted into the other two forms in the liver using vitamin B2. So not only does vitamin B2 happen to be higher in animal foods, so if you don't have enough of that, then you're not going to be converting enough B6 from the plant form into the usable animal forms, but even the B6 that's available from plant foods is in lower amounts in general by total quantity of the foods you normally consume. So there's often sugars in plants, aka fiber, so very long chain sugars that impede its absorption. That's why you see vegans often supplementing baker's yeast, because that has several types of B vitamins that are more available. But just thinking about this isn't natural. It's a food that came about through industrialization, and there's even studies that have shown that the B6 from plants that are in the fiber aren't even absorbable at all. So there doesn't seem to be any evidence that there's any type of humans that have no ability to convert enough of it. So that argument for it not being able to be obtained on a vegan diet can't exactly be made, but it's one that's right on the edge, which is important to mention. And it's been shown quite extensively in various vegetarian cultures that they're very commonly deficient in B6 as well as B2. And the last nutrient you can't get from plant foods, which you can actually now get it from plant foods, but it's only, once again, a result of industrialized methods, is the longer chain omega-3s. You can get this from algae oil now that's been processed, smashing open all the little bits of algae that extract the oil from and put in capsules. That's something that vegans definitely need to take if you have deficiencies of that. Your deficiency can vary. There are people out there who can convert enough short chain omega-3s, which are the omega-3s found in plant foods, to the longer chain ones. And there is actually one land food that would have had this that people could have consumed, and that is purslane. That contains DHA, and I'm not sure how much EPA it may or may not contain, but essentially you'd be getting what you needed from that, but that only grows in certain parts of the world. So all over the world, tribal cultures consumed marine animals and the brains of land animals to get enough EPA and DHA to build their own brains and nervous systems. Yeah, there are unique populations that can convert enough of the short chain omega-3s from plant foods, which is abundant in greens and things like that, but a lot of people don't have enough of that enzyme that makes that conversion, whether they're consuming too many omega-6s, which uses up that same enzyme in its utilization, or they're just genetically not able to do so. But yeah, that one can vary depending on the background of a person. And if you're vegan, yes, you can take the algae oil these days, but you want to make sure it's one that has a good ratio of the EPA and DHA, because there's some that have way too much of one or the other. So just to recap these 5 things, the essential fatty acids, longer chain ones, iron, vitamin B6, B12, and vitamin A are going to vary depending on the person. And there are people who can't get them all, no matter what they do on a vegan diet. And some of those things vegans can now get because of industrialized practices that would have been impossible back in time, even just 50 years ago. So it's a very modern thing that they're able to do this. So take that into consideration if you're really set in the idea that veganism is totally natural and it's what humans are meant to do. I mean, there's tons of other arguments for that type of mentality, but we're not going to get into that in this video. Oh, and I totally forgot, I just realized, there is a 6th one, is vitamin K2. That is a vitamin that is very important for building strong bones, a whole host of things, preventing heart disease, preventing cavities, and it is almost exclusively found in fermented animal foods. You can get it from natto, a fermented soybean, but again, if we're talking about the original natural origins of these things, that was only available in very select parts of Asia, and even then it wasn't available before agriculture. And yes, today you also have the accessibility of vitamin K2 supplements, which are in some cases vegan because they use bacteria to create the nutrient. But this is an example of something that you can't get just out in nature, except again from very, very, very highly specific set sources from plants, but it was much more widely available from plant foods, and that's why humans developed a need for it, is because they were getting it from eggs, from dairy, from organ meats, and from fermented foods, from animal foods as well. So some of the non-essential nutrients that are excellent to get, but are absent from the vegan diet entirely are things like creatine. It's great for exercise, it's great for recovery. That's only available from muscle meats and organ meats in some cases too. And then there's also carnosine, which has some excellent longevity enhancing properties. There's kind of this fallacy out there where vegan doctors and vegan activists, they say there's little to no phytonutrients in animal foods compared to plant foods, and that's just simply not the case. These are classified as phytonutrients. You have your fat-soluble vitamins, which are often considered antioxidants or phytonutrients. You have things like selenium, which is often higher in animal foods, which is an antioxidant. So yeah, just because it doesn't look like a colorful berry doesn't mean it doesn't contain antioxidants. Astaxanthin is a carotenoid which only until very recently was only available in animal foods. Once again, this is one of those things that, yes, it originally comes from algae, and humans weren't in general consuming algae. In those few select tribal groups that were, they weren't consuming it in anywhere near the quantity that would be required to get enough of this, so they would have animal foods in their diet too, whether it's salmon or other things, shrimp. It has a wide range of implications, very important for eye health, and yeah, it wasn't available to vegans until the processing was created to be able to extract that from the algae, which is largely indigestible in many cases. CoQ10 is a nutrient that I would have put in the other list because it is essential. If you didn't have any of it, you would eventually die, but humans have a pretty decent ability to create it, but as they age, it tends to drop off. And that's where dietary or supplement sources of it become quite important for heart health. Traditionally, it's just simply available through eating the hearts of animals, which was a common dish people would eat at various intervals through the year. Eat the whole animal from nose to tail. You'd eventually eat the heart on a regular basis, and you'd be getting loads of CoQ10 that way. Other organs contain certain amounts of it. But yeah, this just isn't available from the plant kingdom, but I'm putting it in this category because we do have the ability to make enough of it from various dietary factors, but it does drop with age. Another nutrient only found in animal foods and available through animal foods is conjugated linoleic acid, CLA for short. It is a fatty type phytonutrient which is preventative to various types of cancers, heart disease, diabetes, and just in general weight management. So grass-fed animal foods are where it's contained, and that is because it's from nutrients found in grass that's converted into that in the animal, and we have no ability to create it unless we're actually eating it in its final form like that. Another thing that's common in grass-fed ruminants is the precursors to things like superoxide dismutase, one of the most important antioxidants our body makes on the cellular level to prevent the degradation of our genetic structure, and then also the precursors to glutathione. And there could essentially be no end to the list that I would create for this. There's all sorts of new things being found, or you could look at various obscure animal foods that you wouldn't actually eat that often, or wouldn't be in most people's diets, that might have some benefit, and you can't get that from plants. But we're just trying to keep it basic for the sake of this video. But you can see there's a number of different things that are beneficial that you simply can't get from plant foods in any way. And these were quite common in our ancestors' diets in the past, so it's pretty important that we continue to get them. Some of them you can get in supplement form now from a more synthetic type process, and by synthetic I mean man-made machinery. It might derive from natural origins, such as bacterial fermentation, which is perfectly fine to consume, but I'm just highlighting the point that this wasn't obtainable until very recently. And in some cases, the whole animal food is going to be better because it's got all the cofactors that help in its utilization and proper absorption. So finally, the last category that I wanted to highlight in why you can't simply just get everything you need from plants is that there are definitely people who find they need a lot more animal foods than plant foods in their diet because it's the overall ratios of nutrients. So yes, you can get protein from plants, you can get various fatty acids of all the basic ones, not including the long chain ones, but it's about ratios. If we're talking about a Plains Indian or a Nordic tribe of some type, or Far East Northern Siberians, all of these groups had very high quantities of animal foods in their diet, and they would have been getting a large amount of protein and saturated fat, and sometimes the monounsaturated fats in a greater quantity than the more polyunsaturated fats and fiber and all these other things that you get more of in plant foods. So if you think of what you get from eating a day's worth of meat in one of those locations, trying to emulate that with plants, the quantity would be so vast that you wouldn't have very good health, because you're bloated from 10 times more fiber than you need. You'd be getting way more sugar in many cases if you're considering consumption of grains and fruit and starches. So yeah, it's just not realistic. If you're designed to consume a diet higher in saturated fats and certain proteins, you're going to be getting a whole different amino acid profile, first of all, from plant foods, but you're also going to be getting different fats. Next to nowhere near enough saturated fats from plant sources, unless you're consuming only coconuts and Brazil nuts. No, you're not going to be able to do that sustainably with only plant foods. If you require that, you need the right ratios. Comes down to minerals as well. If you're evolved to have the minerals that are higher in animal foods in a greater quantity, so that you're not consuming 10 pounds of food just to get that amount of those other things that would have come from animal foods in the past. That last section was a little shorter, but we can see there's things that we might even genetically be unable to get from plants whatsoever. There's things that we can't get from plants that have a lot of benefits that we need to get from animal foods if we want those benefits. And then we have the ratios that are important to consider. So no one's trying to say you only eat animal foods and you can get everything from plants from animal foods. No, that's an extremist ideology. And same as trying to say that we can get everything from plants just isn't the case when you consider all these different factors. It's not just about, oh, this food on this package says that it contains zinc, so that's getting my daily dose of zinc. No. Our ancestors might have needed 10 times the RDA of zinc, first of all. Then you have to consider how much you're actually getting from that plant food, and whether in your entire diet, whether you're getting enough of it on a daily basis. That's an example of yet another nutrient that vegans can end up being very deficient in. So even if you're the unique type that can do quite well in converting enough vitamin A, you're taking a B12 supplement, and you're doing all these other things, and you happen to not need a large amount of protein and saturated fat in comparison to the carbohydrates in your diet, even if that were the case, there's still a lot of things you need to micromanage to make sure you're getting enough of them. So with an animal foods omnivorous type diet, there's a lot less hyper focus on your diet. First of all, that's a big thing you see in the difference between vegans and omnivores, and you're just going to be more relaxed in that because diet isn't taking center stage in your life. And when it comes down to it, it's simply what our ancestors ate, and that should be reason enough for everyone to have some amount of animal foods in their diet. It's going to vary the quantity, but that's my recommendation. There are people who can succeed very long term on vegan diets. They're the very small minority of people, but yeah, this just sums up really what that question is I get so frequently, my thoughts on it. I try and pack that kind of a response into these responses of these questions, but from now on I'm just going to be referring people to this video because I do it far more justice talking about it once in depth, so that I don't have to waste time individually telling people that they're completely flat out wrong in their thinking. So let me know what you think about this video in the comments below. Like, favorite, and share the video if you feel so inclined. And with that, I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.